Hello and thanks for watching this Life Solved episode. I'm Robin Montague, and in these videos we get to meet the University of Portsmouth researchers who are sharing their work in the latest series of Life Solved. This is work that's changing our world for the better in all sorts of ways. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring the hundreds of eyewitness reports that suggest we might not be alone in the universe. Take a look at the science behind long-distance space travel and the statistical likelihood of life on other planets. Also, we'll find out how technology is aiding the search. I'm joined by Dr. Chris Patterson, a research software engineer in the Institute of Cosmology and Gravitation here at the university, and he's no stranger to Life Solved, having already appeared in Series 11. Definitely worth checking that out, all about space failures. But today we're not going to be talking about that, we're going to be talking about UFOs. So Chris, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So before we kick off today's episode, I just want to take a moment to explain where we're recording this episode. This is a space mission incubator.
That's right, yep.
One of the facilities here at the university. What is that?
It's a really nice new room that we've just had installed here at the Institute of Cosmology and Gravitation. And it's to help us help other people achieve space missions. So, for example, academics or industry might come to us and say, we have an idea for something, a small mission or an idea we want to send to space, but we don't have the expertise to do that. How can we send this mission up? And it's to be small missions, not like a big billion-dollar mission, but a small satellite or a small probe to send up. And they can come here to this facility and sit with our team of experts, and we can help them plan out what that mission might look like, work out how feasible it is and what it might cost and how they might actually achieve what they want to achieve. And then we can help, literally incubate that idea and turn it into something that really happens and really flies into space.
That's amazing. Is this one of the only incubators, I suppose, here on the South Coast? I mean, I've never seen anything quite like it. It reminds me of something out of a blockbuster movie.
It looks like a sort of launch control room, I think. You might see when you see a rocket launch to space.
Hopefully there's no big red button anywhere that we have to click.
It's actually, we had a lot of help from NASA and their Jet Propulsion Laboratory. This is sort of modeled after their ideas of how they incubate missions. So it's very similar to stuff they have over at JPL.
So no better place then to record this episode, because we are talking about life off of Earth, hopefully some sort of form of life off of Earth. We'll see how we get on. So let's begin then with the term UAP. Some people might have seen this floating about on, in news articles and following a NASA presentation fairly recently or conference. What is a UAP and why is it relevant to aliens?
Yeah, so what most people would probably call a UFO, NASA is now calling a UAP. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. The first is it's kind of a more general term than UFO. So UAP stands for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. I just had to make sure I got that right. And it's slightly more general than an unidentified flying object because it doesn't just include things that are flying, but it also includes things on land or in sea or in space. So it's just still things we don't know what they are and we have no good explanation for, but not necessarily only flying discs or flying saucers or that sort of thing. So I think that's the first term, sort of a slightly more technical term, reason. But the second reason I think they're pushing for that instead of UFO is just to get away from the sort of sensationalism that UFO brings. Like, if you say a UFO, even though you might just mean, I don't know what that flying thing is, it really makes people think of ET and strange things like that. Whereas UAP, I think they're trying to just be like, there are things we don't know what they are. They might not be aliens, so just calm down. So we're using this different term instead. I think that's the idea.
Almost like a marketing rebrand, isn't it?
Yeah, almost. just they're really trying to focus on like the science and what they can actually explain, rather than these sort of sensational ideas that they're not denying or anything like that. They're just saying, like, let's ground this in the science and the data.
So, the committee set up by NASA wanted to look into has been looking into how plausible these sightings are. What have they found?
They found some interesting things. I guess just off the bat, we should probably say they have no evidence that any of these things are alien. But it's basically, they haven't denied it yet. They haven't said it's not aliens. They just said, we have no evidence that it is aliens. But really, they've taken reports from mostly sort of like fighter pilots or commercial pilots, or anyone really, but those are the most common ones, of things they've seen in the sky or on water that they can't explain, and there are some reports of those. They've taken about 800 of those reports and really just tried to explain them if they can or categorize them if they can't. And most of them have very simple terrestrial explanations that are, like, some are amusing, but some are, just it was a cloud, or very low things on the horizon near water leads to very weird perspective when you're looking at it. So lots of them end up being explained by that, or, weather and that sort of thing. So most of them they've explained away with that, and some of them, about 2 to 5% of these reports, they still have no explanation for, but that doesn't mean they're saying it's aliens. They're saying we don't have good enough data to be able to explain what this is. Like, if you take a very blurry photo or a very blurry short video and say, what is this? It's often really hard to just work out what that is without just guessing. And that's probably, I suspect, what that 2% is things that just don't have good enough data to explain yet.
You said there were 800 reports that they looked at specifically. Is this globally?
I think it's mostly in America, to be honest. I mean, if aliens exist, they definitely prefer America, because if you look at a distribution of where alien sightings are reported, it's almost all in the States. And I think because it's a US government, it's a NASA-led thing, but an independent committee. But I think most of the data is from America, although some of them have been reported from the Middle East as well. I've seen a few of those, so I think it's globally. We'll go with a bit of both.
Is the European Space Agency doing anything similar?
Not that I know of, to be honest. NASA gets a lot of publicity with their, famously they've been quite quiet in the past about UFOs and, Area 51 and all that business. So they get a lot more publicity, and I think this is partly in response to that of, like, look, we're not denying anything, they're now being very open about it, in fact, showing us pretty much everything they have and what they've done to research it, and they're just saying, look, we would tell you if we had evidence, but we don't have any evidence yet, even though we're looking and we're very open to it. But no, I haven't heard of anything that ESA's doing unless it's classified, and I'm not privy to it yet.
So this committee announcement was for transparency reasons, like you said. Now, you mentioned that the reports were from potentially fighter pilots and jets and things, because when I think of a UFO sighting, I immediately think of someone that, might not be an authoritative figure. Yeah. It might be someone that's just out in their garden and spots maybe something in the sky and thinks, oh, it must be a flying saucer. So these are actually people that maybe even work for the government that are reporting.
A lot of them are either commercial pilots or fighter pilots. And I don't know if there's some bias there of they're often, traveling very fast, and you're more likely to be tricked by perspective if you see that sort of thing. But also, they're more likely to be recording when they see these strange things. Like, if you saw something in your garden and you don't take a picture or a video of it and you report it, there's not a whole lot we could do to work out what that was if you don't have something to show us, really, to be honest with you. Like, we have your word, but maybe you don't remember it clearly, or you're a bit confused or excited and you might, not explain it that clearly. Whereas if there's video from a plane, you're more likely to be able to try and work out what it is. But also, I think there is a bit of a stigma about reporting these things to the government, whereas maybe fighter pilots are more likely to say on their radio, I just saw something really weird, we should check out what that is, than maybe you might be if you see something in your garden to report it to the government. I don't know how that biases things. But really, it's a data collection exercise, in that if there's no good photos, then it's really hard to include it in these studies, because we just have no idea what it could have been.
So they've gone through all of these sightings. Were there any in particular that stood out for maybe comical reasons?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my favorite one comes from a former NASA astronaut, actually. He's called Scott Kelly, and he's quite famous for spending a year on the International Space Station while his twin brother spent a year staying on Earth. And they did a very famous study comparing the effects of space on the human body. But he has been a pilot for a long time and is now involved in this committee as well. And one of the reports is from him while he was flying a fighter jet. He flew past something with his co-pilot and said, there was something really strange in the sky. I don't know what that was. Let's go back and check what it was, because this could be really interesting. And when they went back for a second look, they realized it was a Bart Simpson balloon that was just floating past them. And that, I think, really exemplifies how the perspective and the horizon and how weird things move in the air can really trick even very seasoned professional pilots into thinking they've seen something that they didn't. But there was another one, actually in Australia, where there was a specific instrument that kept seeing this really strange radio signal. Like, it just kept appearing in their data. And they were like, what is this radio signal. We have no clue. We're not looking for anything with it, but like that could look like this, and there's nothing around us that we don't think that it could be. And then when they started digging a little bit deeper, they realized, it really mostly appears sort of around lunchtime, and it doesn't really appear much either side of lunchtime. And then they realized it's people heating up their lunch in the microwave. And when they open the microwave, some of those spill out and they look like radio waves in the signal. And they really were just picking up people heating their lunch in their detectors, which is like kind of amusing and just shows you how, if you don't know the source of something, it can really trick you into not like thinking it's really interesting. But really, it's just microwaves, and I think that's a good one.
You mentioned the Bart Simpson thing, and I know that Simpsons are quite well known for predicting the future. So
Yeah.
this is another one of those. So NASA have basically said what then from these findings? What was their conclusion from their investigation?
Their conclusion was basically, look, we all know you want us to find aliens, and we promise we're looking, and we promise we'll tell you if we find anything, but we absolutely have not seen any evidence here yet that any of these could be extraterrestrial in origin. There's a lot of ongoing work. This was just the initial report from the committee. It's continuing its work. And actually, they've just appointed a new director for UAP studies. So that's a brand new job role in NASA to lead this study and lead this committee and really try and get to the bottom of it. But going forward, what they really want is more reports. So they're really trying to encourage people, if you see something strange, to not just tell someone, but to take a photo or to take a video and then send it in to NASA, to really just report it more. And that, like, they described it as they're looking for a needle in a haystack to try and find something interesting, but they don't know what the needle looks like yet. So you better have a lot of data to try and figure out what that needle looks like if you're going to ever pull it out of the haystack. That's what they want. So if you knew what the needle looked like, it would be pretty easy to find it in strange reports. But they don't, so they're trying to really just sift out all of the hay so they can be left with that one or more interesting needle to talk about. And they did promise in this report that if they did find evidence, they would say they wouldn't keep it a secret. So I guess we just have to believe that.
You were saying there as well about the fact that people shouldn't be put off from reporting incidents. This is not them turning around and saying it's just never going to happen. They're just saying you need more concrete evidence.
Yes, they can't. If you just say what you saw, it's really hard to say, oh yeah, that was definitely a UFO or a UAP. We really need to see clear images, like the higher quality images you can give to NASA to prove your story, the more likely it is that they'll take it seriously and be able to include it in these reports and get to the bottom of it and hopefully find something interesting.
I suppose as well, we were speaking about this before we started recording, deep fake technology and things like that. People are getting very clever with, doctored photos or creating images that look really real. We've all seen gone to cinema and seen something and thought, wow, that's incredible. Does that play a part in this as well, obviously?
I guess at some point it will. I don't know if it has yet, but I think if you're submitting something that's been doctored, unless it's been done incredibly well, I suspect the experts will A, be able to tell by looking at it, and B, by looking at the file you've sent them or submitted and taking apart how that was produced and when it was filmed and all that stuff. So you'd have to go, maybe I'm giving people ideas on how to do it properly, but you'd have to go into the metadata and really change, I think, that file to trick this sort of study. And obviously, if it's something too sensational and you're the only person that's filmed it and you're claiming to have seen a massive UFO over San Francisco, there'd be other people reporting the same thing. So it's not just taking that file in isolation, but it's looking at where it was taken or looking at the story around it and trying to get to the bottom of it as a whole, not just one cool video.
And you'd think in 2023 people would, be pretty clocked on with that. However, there is still a fair amount of sensationalist sightings. For instance, we don't know this is sensationalist, obviously, because there haven't been experts to actually look at it from other countries, I believe. But Mexico, what's happening in Mexico?
Yeah, so a couple of months ago, a journalist went to the Mexican government and presented to them what he claimed were 2 alien bodies. And just to be clear, this isn't Mexico saying they have aliens. This was like one journalist saying it to them, and they were live streaming the hearing that they were talking about it at. And he showed off 2 sort of small humanoid-ish, sort of mummy-looking bodies and claimed they were recovered from Peru, and they were sort of 1,000-year-old aliens that he's recovered. But that's kind of all the evidence we have is him saying that. I think, he said, they have a certain percent of unknown DNA, so they can't be human, so they must be aliens. And I think that's a really easy thing to test. If that's true, they should release samples of that DNA to other countries and other universities and let them test it. And it will be super easy to confirm or deny this. The fact that they haven't done that, to me, is a big red flag for, how can this be real if you won't, if you're going to make a huge claim like that, you have to be able to back it up with evidence. And this journalist has a history of saying he has aliens, and once they get investigated, it turns out he doesn't. He's presented mummified children before, that he's found in old graves and stuff, and said, look, I found aliens. And then when the DNA was tested, it was oh no, these are just mummified children, which I'm not, a bad history doesn't mean he's lying now, but it certainly doesn't help me believe him on the initial story. So I'm very skeptical. On a personal point of view, I don't know that I believe aliens would look that similar to us. I don't even know if aliens would have DNA in the same way that we do. I'm not sure that's a given. I'm not an expert in astrobiology in this sense, but I don't know that that's a 100% thing that they would have DNA in the same way that we do. Maybe they would, and also I think he said they have 30% unknown DNA. And to me, that's pretty low. 70% the same as us seems really similar for aliens. So I don't know. There's a lot about this story that is a big red flag to me. But mostly it's just, if you believe it, just release some samples and let other people test it. And it would be super easy to confirm or deny.
It says a lot about the narcissism of mankind, doesn't it? When we assume that another life form would look very similar to us, yes. Albeit almost exactly like us. And you think that these will be from different atmospheres, they'd have different types of elements wherever planet they're from, if it's from a planet. I have to agree with you there that I'm also very skeptical about that particular incident. And we mentioned about the whole classified information. And NASA's point here is to be a bit more transparent and open so people wouldn't be skeptical and wouldn't think that there's some sort of massive conspiracy taking place within governments. But I suppose a lot of people were quite disappointed that there wasn't a lot to it at all. It seemed like a pretty,
It was a big announcement to say they haven't found anything yet.
Yeah, why did they go so big with it?
I think they're trying to show off how transparent they're being. They're look, we're looking for it. And in these reports, there is absolutely nothing to confirm anything like this. I think that's really the only reason. It's to show, look, we're not deliberately hiding anything. We're trying to get to the bottom of this as well. So please believe us, and if you see anything, report it, and then we'll get to these answers quicker.
So despite them not finding anything yet, they are still continuing the search for extraterrestrial life, including with telescopes like the JWST telescope. Mm-hmm. So what are they hoping to find with that?
That is a much more... I guess the difference here is these UAPs are reports of, or people are hoping will be reports of extraterrestrial life here on Earth. And telescopes like JWST are really looking for signs that life could be out there further afield, like on another planet in another galaxy. Well, probably on another planet, not in another galaxy. I don't think we have the capability to see that yet. But what we're really looking for is clues that there are planets similar to our own. That's, it's distant planets are quite big, but they're really far away. So it's really hard to look at them in enough detail to see little cars driving around or little buildings. So what we're really looking for in the first instance is similar sized planets at the right distance away from a star that liquid water could exist on their surface. So that's called the Goldilocks zone in the distance from the star. And that's just because all life on Earth that we know of needs water to survive in liquid form. So, life could be completely different on other planets, but we would have no idea how to start looking for it, basically. So we're looking for something similar-ish in that sense. So we're looking for, similar-sized rocky planets where liquid water can be on the surface. And then beyond that, we're using telescopes like JWST to look for things called biosignatures. So these are clues on the planet that life is present there. So an obvious biosignature would be a leaf, but that's too small for us to see with these telescopes. So we're looking for more subtle things like certain chemicals in the atmosphere that, as far as we know, are only produced or only present in large numbers by life. So the Earth's atmosphere is a reasonably high percentage oxygen. And that is mostly because there's so many life forms breathing out oxygen. Whereas oxygen tends to react with other chemicals and either bond or break down other chemicals. So it doesn't tend to be in such high percentages in other atmospheres unless there's life continually breathing it out. So we're looking for these chemical signatures in the atmospheres to say, is it likely that this is being produced by life, and looking for these specific biosignatures in the atmospheres. And this is a super hard thing to do well, even with incredible instruments like JWST. But it involves a lot of really hard disentangling of like the light coming from the planet, from the light coming from the star that it's orbiting, and then it's traveling a long way to reach us, and then we've got to break down that light and work out what it's telling us about that planet, and that's what we're really looking for, is these biosignatures. So it's not someone we'll be able to talk to in any reasonable time, but it's just a clue that we aren't alone. Is really what we're looking for.
It is, like you said, a needle in a haystack, but on an astronomical scale.
Absolutely, yeah.
It is mind-blowing. And you've mentioned about how you have to remain fairly sceptical, or it is science. This is about science. It's about concrete evidence. But is there a part of you that also remains optimistic that there's life out there? Do you, on a personal level, hope to find that?
Yeah, from a personal point of view, I think it's almost inevitable that there is life somewhere out there. Going back to the UAPs, I think it's vanishingly unlikely that they've come to Earth and are doing so as little balls flying around near planes. But I think, the universe is so big, and I don't know, from a personal point of view, I don't think we're as special as we maybe think we are. I think we got lucky where we are, or really we evolved where we could, so maybe luck isn't the right word, but I think it's almost inevitable that these conditions will have arisen in other planets, maybe in other galaxies billions of light years away, and we'll never know about them. But I think it's very, I don't know what the word is, very egotistical to think that we're the only ones. And I think they might not look like us, but there must be someone out there, in my opinion. I just don't think they're visiting us right now or have ever done, to be honest with you.
Maybe they turned up and took one look at us and turned around again.
Yeah, or they're far enough away that they're still seeing the dinosaurs on the surface, and they're like, those guys look pretty cool. We should go visit them.
Yeah.
And when they arrive, it's just going to be absolutely not what they were expecting.
But this seems to have been going on for decades. We've been searching for life. I mean, the first thing that we blasted out into space with the images that we had, it was of the man and woman, wasn't it?
I think you're talking about the golden record on Voyager. The Voyager spacecrafts had these golden records of like the things we considered essential, and included like a picture of a man and a woman, and other sort of, it's really hard to try and talk to aliens because they don't speak English or any other language on Earth. So we have to sort of encode these things with pictures and binary ideas and things about light, and that's how we've encoded it on these discs. But yeah, I think it's, we want there to be other things out there, but it's just hard to see, especially things that we would talk to. Maybe there's like microbes on a moon of Jupiter or something, but they're not going to give much back even if we detect them.
If you could send out a disc now, what would you say would be fundamental to include on it?
Oh my goodness.
Would you make any changes? That's quite a big question,
isn't it? That's a huge question. I would obviously link to my YouTube channel first and foremost, and secondly, I would link to Life Solved podcast.
Shameless plugs.
Shameless plugs. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a very tough question, but it would be interesting. I wonder if that's something that maybe NASA or the ESA are considering to send out an updated version, because we've learnt so much since that must have been sent out.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that we're kind of always broadcasting to space, in so much as like the radio, like radio signals, and radio carries a lot of other things now, like including like telephone and TV and stuff can be transmitted on radio. And that's not just stopping when it reaches TVs, it's being blasted all the time into space. So ever since we invented anything that is talking like via radio or anything like that, it's all been going out into space. And if someone had the right detector or receiver, they could decode that in theory and get some of that information back. So all the TV shows we've ever watched are all out there somewhere. All the music is out there. And we have specifically been sending like radio signals with these same sort of ideas, like not rather than printing them on a gold disc and sending them out. That's pretty hard to do. We do regularly send out radio signals with this sort of encoded information as well. Just hopefully just sort of shouting into the abyss, hoping that someone shouts back.
Kind of beautiful when you think about it, really.
Beautiful or terrifying? Because if they did shout back, I mean, that would be awful. I mean, it would be so exciting. But
You want to hear something, but also you would freak out.
And you'd want it to be friendly rather than like, hey, you guys look real tasty. Like, that's not going to be a good message to receive back.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Are they friendly visitors, or are they here to destroy us all?
I mean, if they're anything like humans, then I would not hold out much hope.
Exactly. Well, on that really pleasant thought,
sorry to bring it down to that.
On that really pleasant thought, you mentioned there obviously your YouTube channel. You do go into a bit more depth about the NASA briefing on UFOs or UAPs, as they are now known. So where can people go to check that out?
Yeah, it's my YouTube channel is just my name, so it's Chris Patterson. Hard to spell, but give it a go. And yeah, on that I talk about all things, astronomy news, space news, talking about the latest images from JWST or the latest announcements from ESA and NASA and anything space related. So you should all come and check it out.
Amazing. So thank you so much again for talking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure having you back on.
Thank you for
I'm
having
sure
me.
you'll be back on again in the future at some point. Maybe when they finally do discover life exists.
You'll be my first port of call when that announcement is made.
So the human needs to discover other life beyond our own planet is decades old. Once we've grasped the thumbnail sketch of how the universe works, it must have seemed obvious that there might be other beings out there. Or as we've discussed today, maybe it isn't that obvious. Maybe we're just special. Guys, we're special. If you'd like to listen to our full episode of Life Solved, the audio version exploring the world of UAPs, head to the University of Portsmouth website. All you've got to do is port.ac.uk/Life Solved, and you'll find it there, along with all of our other episodes, including Chris's previous one on epic space fails. I loved that episode. I thought that was brilliant. You can click the link in the comments box below. And you can also find out more about the Institute of Cosmology and Gravitation and the Space Mission Incubator that we're in on our website, so definitely check that out. Next time, we take a look at one of the problems we create for ourselves here on Earth as humans, how so-called incels are using TikTok to spread hate and lies. See you then.